Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for the monthly Q&A series. We are here in July and, well, Australia, or at least parts of Australia, are back in lockdown. So we've had to bring out Monitor Steve once again. But we are treated to Monitor Steve in his wonderful shed where it looks like you're being a bit of a DeWalt shill. So what is going on in the background there?
We don't need to talk about that, Tim. We'll just move along and pretend it's not there. But yeah, as you guys know, I have the odd DeWalt tool. You kind of get locked into an ecosystem with the cordless power tools. You can't have 6 different sets of batteries. So anyway, as I said, we're not going to talk about that, Tim. We'll just move on. But yeah, we are in serious lockdown, and you know it's serious when I'm down in the shed. And there's various reasons for why I'm in the shed. But basically, up at my house, we've had to dodge a lot of different things going on. So I'm getting my driveway done, so there's bobcats and stuff making tons of noise up there. Because we are in lockdown, both of my kids are home, so no school or anything like that. And yeah, so I've been moved from my regular studio down into the shed to do the Q&A. But the Q&A must go on. We can't miss it. So yeah, this is what we've done. Hopefully it works out okay again.
Even if you've been banished, the show is going to continue. And we've got, a bunch of wonderful questions. We'll have probably the usual 3-part sort of setup, mix of YouTube, Discord community questions. And yeah, so we just get straight into it.
Today's video sponsor is Thermal Grizzly and their Cryonaut Extreme, which is now available in a 2-gram syringe. This high-performance thermal paste delivers maximum thermal conductivity thanks to an extremely small particle size and layer thickness. It's also very flexible, capable of standing up to sub-zero temperatures for extreme overclocking, but also performs exceptionally well for air and water cooling applications. So if your CPU or GPU needs repasting, then I suggest checking out the Thermal Grizzly range. Link is in the video description.
Okay, question. Examples of sponsors that you refused because of ridiculous demands. No need to mention names. Appreciate the great content. Keep it up, guys. So, have you got anything off the top of your head, Tim?
Well, let's be honest. We get a ton of sponsorship and advertising requests and all those sorts of things from all sorts of really dodgy stuff. I think the ones that we've talked about previously are things like, the CD key resellers that are very, well, I don't want to just make claims that could get me into legal trouble, but let's just say I'm not 100% sure of the legitimacy of some of those key resellers. So, those sorts of things where they just go crazy and are offering tons of money come to mind. But for a lot of the main, PC hardware companies that we deal with, like for monitors or motherboards or graphics cards or any of those companies, it's pretty rare, I think I'd say, to get sponsorship demands that have these sorts of ridiculous things in it. Like, I think you're probably talking about, for example, the LG situation where they tried to offer money for certain review outcomes. Again, I think that's a fairly rare outcome, wouldn't you say, in what you've experienced?
Yeah, I've been trying to think if I've got any examples, but it is a very rare thing to come up against that. Like, over the years, I've had the occasional, can you change the thumbnail or the title to, make it a little less damaging? But yeah, we always just said, I'm sorry, that's how it is, unless, we got something wrong. But usually they're just asking us to lessen the blow a bit. But yeah, in that instance, we don't change anything. Not that super ridiculous, but it's about the best I can come up with. I mean, the most ridiculous stuff was, the situation we had with NVIDIA last year and then more recently with LG. And I think the reason why those situations are rare, especially for us at Hardware Unboxed, is because most of the contacts we deal with kind of know our approach to things and how we go about it. So the personal contacts that we've developed relationships with over the years, they just know. They're like, it is what it is. We'll try and do better next time. Like with MSI with the X570 motherboards, I know those guys really well. They were very disappointed with the results, but as I said many times now, they went and confirmed them. They just replied saying, look, disappointing is what it is. We're going to improve for next time.
Yeah, so I think over the years we've had the occasional offer from companies to do more of the sponsored video type content where it's very clear from the outset that, they want to do that sort of video, which is not something that we do on the channel, but obviously many YouTubers out there do sponsor sort of videos like that. So, and that very quickly just becomes, we're not interested in doing that sort of content. It very rarely gets to this stage, like with the LG situation, where we're sitting there midway through review and then they're trying to change things and make up demands midway through. It's usually very clear we can just, politely decline it from the outset, and then everyone goes about their business. And so, and even then, that again, as you were sort of saying, companies sort of know once we decline one of those, things with a reason, that they don't usually come back, the next time in a couple of months. It's usually just, oh, you don't do sponsored reviews or sponsored videos, so we'll just not come to you with those offers in the future. So it's not something we have to deal with that often, which is great, because it's kind of annoying to deal with that sort of thing.
Okay, Tim, I've got a question here for you. Actually, it's not my question, but anyway. You don't review any Lenovo monitors, okay? They have a great and affordable Legion lineup with the Y27Q20 and G27Q20. Did I do a good job there, Tim?
Pretty good job. If that's the first time you've ever seen those, you're getting the hang of it.
They were very simple, I have to admit. They're probably half the length of the usual monitor names that you have to deal with. But anyway, why is it? Why don't we review any Lenovo monitors?
It's something that we've tried to organize in the past with Lenovo, but here in Australia, it's just one of those situations where, most companies that we review their products for, we have a pretty good relationship with their, PR teams to get review samples and that sort of thing, because while we do like to buy some review samples that, we can't get from other means, we can't buy absolutely everything. So when it comes to monitors, we do rely on companies sending out products for us to review the majority of the time. And with Lenovo, they're just one company that, doesn't really send out a lot of stuff, and their Australian PR team just happens to not be that interested in working with us, which is fine. They're under no obligation to work with us, but it's just different to some of the other companies that we have better relationships with, and they're more willing to send stuff out. So, I have nothing against Lenovo if they want to send out monitors for me to review. If there's a monitor that is particularly interesting, then we might buy it. But for now, it's just one of those situations where they don't really have any interest in sending stuff out to us. We don't have a lot of interest in reviewing some of their products for now. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully that'll change at some point in the future, and we can start checking out Lenovo monitors.
Okay, Tim, I'm going to ask you this one, because this is, I feel it's a little bit, well, it's certainly more in your wheelhouse than mine. How far into your wheelhouse it is, I'm not sure, but what are your general thoughts on the Steam Deck? How long will its hardware last? What effects could it have on the rest of PC gaming? Would the low screen res be helped by a new up-res tech such as FSR, or are those too bad for such a low resolution? So 4-ish different questions there, all about the Steam Deck. So what do you reckon, Tim?
Yeah, it looks interesting. I think we've seen Valve not super well support their hardware projects in the past. I think you can go back to things like the Steam machines as one example, where they kind of came out with this cool console killer type PC alternative using PC hardware, and didn't really amount to much in the long term. So hopefully something like the Steam Deck, which I guess is kind of like a Nintendo Switch alternative with PC hardware inside, doesn't go down that path, because that would be disappointing. But it certainly is generate, I think, more interest than the Steam machines did. There's been a lot of pre-orders, so I think that's pretty promising. And I guess most of my thoughts generally revolve around that more than the hardware, which I think is perfectly reasonable for sort of a portable console. I mean, you can't be putting super powerful, 50 watt or even 35 watt GPUs in, a small machine that's designed to be run off a tiny battery, and you want to get multiple hours of battery life. So I think using something like a custom or newer generation AMD APU with RDNA 2 graphics should provide a pretty decent experience. I mean, you've just recently been reviewing stuff like the 5700G on the channel. I've tested things like, the 5800U, which also is a very similar design. And while it's not going to give you a high-end experience, it's certainly good enough to play some games, not every game, but some games at sort of your 1080p low settings, 1080p medium in competitive settings, in competitive shooters and that sort of thing. And then there's a few games that can't be run at like 30 FPS, which hopefully the upgrade to RDNA 2 will make that a little bit easier for those games to just push over the edge. And certainly for something like that sort of console, 30 FPS gaming is probably what you're going to have to tolerate for the most part. But again, we're talking about a portable machine. Like, we're not going to be getting a major excellent PC gaming experience. It's more about the portable experience, and things like playing at 720p are going to be fine. As for this second part here where it's asking about FSR, I guess FSR is going to be beneficial if you literally cannot run the game at the native screen resolution. So if you turn down everything to the lowest settings and it's still not enough to run at, I believe it's a 720p screen, don't quote me on that, but if it is, then, you know, if we're at that level and you need to use FSR, sure, it's going to be better than nothing. But FSR hasn't impressed me that much below 1080p, and I think when you did some Dota 2 testing as well, it wasn't that useful in a game like that.
Even at 1080p, it was very blurry. I think even at like 75% render scale. So yeah, if you're talking about 720p, I think you get to the point where is it playable in the sense that you can make out what you're doing in the game.
Yeah,
I think you'd be better off just sticking to games that will play well on it, like, you know, your CS:GO maybe, Rainbow Six Siege, Fortnite.
Yeah.
Any other sort of genres that are of similar demand to those games, and they'll run fine. They'll be really enjoyable. You don't need to be playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for example.
Yeah, exactly. I think as well, once you're at those resolutions, it's more about the quality settings type thing. Like if you're already using well, I guess a small screen is going to make it a little bit harder to notice the blurriness of FSR at lower resolutions. But I still would think that you're going to generally want to run at native resolution as much as you possibly can with lower settings before you start messing with that. But again, that doesn't take away from what I think is going to be a pretty interesting machine at the very least. Like being able to see that new hardware, be able to see what games can run on. Unfortunately, it's not available in Australia, so not sure what we'll be able to do. But certainly other channels, I'm sure, will jump on it and take a look at what it can offer. So yeah, I'm excited to see what it can do. Definitely. Next question is, when do you think Intel will have some actually competitive performance level GPU to go against the 3080 or 3090, but also have something at the entry level for us with not so deep pockets? So I think at the entry level is kind of where Intel is. They've already got like a DG1, don't they, which is kind of a GT 1030 competitor. So they've got that, so tick that box off.
Yeah, and if you're talking about slightly better than that, then I think that would be more short term than what we're talking about 3080, 3090.
That sort of entry level GPU seems very achievable with what they've got. Like in terms of, you know, the DG1 is basically their integrated graphics, you know. So if you add in a few more execution units into there, then you should have a very capable entry level GPU. So that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But it sounds like some of the, well, again, can we trust rumors? Probably not. But the rumors are sort of suggesting 3070-like performance for the higher end gaming GPUs from Intel. At least that's what they're claiming. So if that's what the rumors are suggesting, which tend to be optimistic most of the time, then it sounds unlikely that 3080 or 3090 performance will be reached anytime soon, which is going to be problematic because those GPUs are now almost a year old. So if you're coming out with below 3080 performance now, then you're opening yourself up for next generation competition. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that goes.
All right. You might have something to say about this, Tim, with all your GPU pricing updates. You did one just a few days ago. Are we ever going to see entry-level GPU prices go to what they used to be at 100 euros to 200 euros? What's that funny money? Or are we just stuck paying 400 euros for what is marketed as an entry-level GPU? An entry-level GPU as the 3060 and 3060 Ti. So go for it, Tim.
I think there's been a lot of doom and gloom about this topic. A lot of like people saying...
Fair enough, though.
Well, again, it's all valid in the current market, and people saying, oh, you know, GPUs are never going to be... You're never going to get a $200 GPU again. It's always going to be $400. I don't really see that happening as much because there's always going to be people that can only afford to spend that much on a GPU. So there's always going to be people that want... You know, I can't afford $400, so I'm going to need to spend $200. If there's literally nothing available, then that's a lost sale. But whether the question is, are we going to see new GPUs launched in there, or are we going to see more of a focus on older product lines or used GPUs being available for like $200, which may happen. But even today, like, under normal times, Nvidia would be selling you things like a 1660 or a 1650 in that sort of price category. Similarly, AMD would still be selling you 5500s and RX 580s and that sort of thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, a new generation product, which, to be honest, is fine for sometimes. Like, in a lot of these situations, we're seeing all these new products sell out so quickly, and the foundry capacity is at its limit, pushing out 3060s and above, that it makes sense, in my opinion, to keep some of those older products on the market for longer and slowly see them trickle down in price, like an RX 580 or 570, which in the good times was selling for like $150 or less for some of those lower end products. Obviously they're back up now, but back then that's what they were available for. So I think there's a whole range of things that we'll see happen in that market, that we won't just see no cards available in that price range. But in the future, if we could see 2060s, for example, come down to like $200, that would be, a really good option for people, even if new generation cards launch, because, progressively move stuff down. So, yeah, maybe there'll be more of a focus on new products being $400 and above. I certainly think at the high end, GPU pricing is going to get a lot more ridiculous, because people have shown that they can afford $1,500 GPUs, $2,000 GPUs. But the range is just going to expand, and that's going to mean more products on the market, more used stuff. The used market's going to be great, all that sort of thing. But again, we're talking in the nice, positive future at this point, which we have no idea when that's going to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the real question is, what kind of performance are you going to get at those price points? Because as Tim said, and I 100% agree with, there is a market of people that are only going to spend even like $200 US or even $100 US on a graphics card, and they don't want to buy an AMD APU. And Nvidia certainly doesn't want them buying AMD APUs, so they're going to provide something at that price point. And they also don't want them buying. I've heard people say, that it's going to be the secondhand market that you'll turn to. Like, again, Nvidia doesn't get anything out of secondhand GPU sales, so they're not interested in that happening at all. They would much rather sell you a $200 US GPU than have you buy a secondhand GeForce 100%. GPU for that price. So if there's a market there to be serviced, they will service it. At the moment, they're not doing it for obvious reasons. And the reasons are, there's multiple reasons, which is why it's so bad this time. And I guess why we have got sort of the doom and gloom scenario where people are like, this is so bad, it's never going to solve itself. But there's a lot of reasons why availability is what it is and why pricing is what it is. And they're somewhat linked, but there are a lot of different reasons, from shipping costs increasing and the difficulty of shipping, tariffs, demand from gamers that still hasn't been fulfilled, the crypto scene, there's so many different reasons. But I mean, 2020 alone, esports blew up in 2020. Millions of people who wouldn't have previously looked at building a gaming PC looked to build a gaming PC. I know dozens of people, friends of mine, who were never PC gamers, and then they started watching the F1 scene and got into all the F1, advertising they did. And then they started to want to play the F1 game, and they're building simulators at home and stuff. And that all requires graphics cards. So the market just exploded. So there's a whole heap of things that happened at pretty much the same time, which is why it's going to take a while to recover. If crypto went away tomorrow, we're still looking at a very long time before just the demand from gamers is met and we can start going back to normal. So yeah, it's going to be a while.
Yeah, and I think as well with modern games, we're not in a situation like maybe 5 years ago where you really did need pretty high-end GPUs to run some of those games, and there wasn't a lot of scaling between like the highest settings that those games could run at and the lowest settings. Whereas today, I think part of this is helped by having still games being made for last generation consoles, for things like the Xbox Series S, and then you've got the higher end consoles like the Series X and the PS5, that game scaling is pretty good. Like, you can run a lot of games still look good running on medium settings as opposed to running on ultra settings, and there's still a lot of people out there that have 1080p displays as opposed to a lot of modern GPUs are designed more for 4K gaming. So that's gonna, while we may see this widening of the market where high-end cards might be selling for $2,000 or above, if you're still running like a 1080p display or even a 1440p display, and games are still looking great running on medium settings, then buying those $200 GPUs is not going to be like the end of the world. You're still going to get a good experience with that sort of thing. But that's going to be something that we'll have to assess over time, just to see how everything's playing out. And as Steve mentioned, it's not going to be an overnight flick of the switch type thing where everything's back to normal. yeah, it's always a slow fall off. So yeah, we'll keep monitoring that. Is a lack of cache the only reason why the 5700G can't compete with the 5800X, or are there any other limitations?
I haven't really deep dived into it and done a whole lot of investigation into that one, but it certainly seems to be the primary reason why. In terms of clock speeds, they are very similar. Obviously, similar amount of cores and threads, same architecture. It's just monolithic versus chiplet. So yeah, I think that is, I would put that down certainly as the number one reason. I'd be shocked if it wasn't.
Yep.
So that's that one really. And as we've seen, that really impacts all kinds of performance from applications, but in particular, a really big impact in games, which I found, I knew it would impact games, but probably to the degree I found quite surprising. What did you make of that, Tim?
Yeah, I found it, I was expecting to be closer for sure. Even in applications, I was expecting it to be a bit closer. I mean, I've seen on the mobile testing that the improvement in cache has helped AMD substantially, because I think even on the mobile side, they were running like 8 meg of cache previously. They moved up to 16. We saw a big performance improvement. So obviously when you see the desktop parts with 32 meg of cache, then that's going to improve things further. So yeah, on the gaming side, I was surprised. Again, there's always limitations with the monolithic dies to how much cache they can put in there. That's why the chiplet design has been so great for AMD. Putting 32 meg of cache is no big deal in that sort of design. So yeah, I think it probably is the main limitation, and yeah, we'll just hope that future monolithic designs, future APUs and that sort of thing can sort of move up to be closer to the desktop specifications in terms of, yeah, having the same sort of cache, the same sort of memory performance and that sort of thing, which would help those products with graphics still compete with the non-graphics part and make them a bit more compelling. Because I totally agree with your review where you said that because there is that performance deficit compared to the 5800X, that it's not really worth buying. Like if it was giving you 5800X gaming performance but wasn't costing you $400, it's costing you $360, that's not bad. But the lower performance just doesn't make it worth it, unfortunately. All right, Steve, this is very topical because you happen to be in your shed right now. Can we please see more about your shed? I feel like we are all sleeping on the talent and effort it took to make that thing. So I think a lot of people were very impressed with the shed sort of snippets that we gave in one of the previous Q&As.
Yeah, well, you're seeing more of it now. So as I said, I am in the shed because of reasons that we've probably already spoken of. Yeah, well, basically, if you want to see more of it, you have to sign up to our Floatplane or Patreon accounts, because I did a lot of behind the scenes. Well, I did it as much as I could. I was hoping to do a lot more behind the scenes content, but as it turns out, I don't envy the guys that do a lot of renos and building projects, because keeping the camera safe, like thousands of dollars worth of audio and video equipment while you're building, and that is very difficult. And without a dedicated camera person, which I obviously don't have, that was hard. So I filmed as much as I could, which wasn't as much as I would have liked to, but it is what it is. And well, I guess thank you for the kind words. I'm glad I was actually really surprised. I didn't think people would really pay that much attention to it. It's just the shed build. But yeah, the comment section was pretty largely dominated by comments about the shed. So maybe if I can come up with some other B-roll, I'll send that to Tim and he can lay it in now into this part of the video if there's anything interesting. But yeah, it's not super interesting inside.
It's pretty interesting that you're able to build the vast majority of it by yourself. And as someone that's been there, it is really big. Like, it is genuinely...
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine building something like that. So, yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. So at times my wife helped me, like when I did the timber frame, she helped me stand those up. I don't know how much they weighed, but I nearly popped something, I swear, trying to pick those, because I did like whole walls in one section just because it's a lot easier to keep it square. The probably some of the bigger challenges were, so I had my wife help at times, and then her father, so my father-in-law, and when I brought Colorbond sheets down, my dad came and helped with that as well. So a bit of a family effort, so I can't take all the credit. But yeah, I engineered, designed it, and basically built it. And I think the hardest part, which a few people were like, there's no way you could have done this by yourself, was basically the structure's held up, or what adds a lot of strength to it are 100 by 100 steel beams that are 4 mil thick, and they come in 8 meter lengths. I think they're about 120 to 150 kilos per beam. So I carried that down with, I think my wife's father-in-law. So two of us carried them down here. And then to stand them up, I drilled a hole with an excavator. And then my father-in-law held a bit of timber in the back of the hole. And then I put the beam on my shoulder and then walked down it as I slid it into the hole, all 120, 150 kilos of it. And I did about 28 of those over 2 days. And my shoulder here was just black. Like, it was so badly bruised from doing that. So that was hard. Putting up like the C-purlins for the roof, they're 15 meters long and they're easily 150 kilos. And I did them actually by myself. So that was hard. I basically had to grab one end of it and walk up the ladder. That was quite the gym exercise. Thankfully, the ladder didn't crumble with both of our weight. And then put it on one end, shuffle it out, and then push it back the other way. But it took me 18 months to build it. It was just a side project that I filmed every now and then for the Patreon members. Well, yeah, obviously it was during a very, very busy period of the channel. So It was like if I had half a day, here or a couple of hours there, I'd come down here and do what I could do and then get back to benchmarking. And yeah, thankfully a lot of the benchmarking and all that sort of work we can do late at night when it's dark and you're not going to be outside doing all that sort of stuff. So anyway, it was fun. I really enjoyed doing this stuff. The project was probably, the shed project's probably the biggest single project I've done. Yeah, really happy with how it turned out. So 10 years of messing around gave me enough experience to take this one on. Anyway, thanks to everyone who left a nice comment. And yeah, if you want to see more, Patreon or Floatplane. Cool. But yeah, there'll be more stuff to come in the future as well. Anyway, probably a long enough answer on that one. I think we should probably get on to the next one, Tim. Is PBO worth it to enable for a gaming-focused PC? I mean, it takes a second to turn it on in the BIOS or whatever, or Ryzen Master software, so you can turn it on and see. But I mean, for a gaming-focused PC, probably not. Look, I guess, again, it depends on what you're after. If you're one of those gamers that needs every single last frame, so you'd probably have Zen 3 in that case, and you're trying to squeeze, like I said, every last frame out of it for a CSGO type game, then maybe it's worth it to give you a few percent more performance. I haven't really done a whole lot of PBO testing with Zen 3, admittedly, because I think we probably looked at it for the day one review and it was like, doesn't really do a whole lot. Yeah. Those auto overclocking features are generally very, very mild because, they can't have you turning on PBO and the computer blue screening left, right, and center, which some people have reported does happen with PBO enabled. But yeah, generally, I think if you really want to boost your performance, you'd be better off spending quite a bit of time and effort fine-tuning your memory timings, especially with Ryzen processors. Well, it does a lot with Intel as well. That's generally the best way to boost performance, though. Yeah,
I think it's like the general overclocking story from the last couple of generations, isn't it? It's like, you can turn on those features and you get a little bit more performance, but then, you need better cooling because the power budget just goes, like that. It's just overclocking isn't as much of a thing these days as opposed to memory tuning, which seems to be sort of the more dominant overclocking type sort of thing that we're seeing today.
It's where the gains are. But again, as we've shown with the scaling benchmarks, it really comes down to what sort of gamer you are. So if you're someone like Tim who likes the single-player story-driven type games, it's like overclocking, why bother? You're going to be GPU limited. And most of the time, you'll be getting a satisfactory level of performance anyway because you don't need 200 FPS or whatever. I think in most of those games, 120 FPS is a very nice experience for someone with a high refresh rate monitor.
Absolutely, yep.
And then, if you're playing a Fortnite or a CSGO type game, I mean, if you've got a modern processor like a 5600X, I doubt you really need to overclock to squeeze more out of it. You're looking at hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of frames per second. So, I guess that's another reason why overclocking isn't as popular as it once was. It's because, they're pushing these CPUs very close to the limits out of the box. They're not leaving 20-30% frequency on the table like we used to see in the Core 2 Duo days and older. All right, when do you think Windows 11 will become the OS for your reviews? Much before or much after it's adopted by the audience or mainstream? Hopefully not too much concurrent. Windows 10 and 11 double the work. Yeah, we definitely won't be testing anything on Windows 10 and Windows 11. We might do like a Windows 10 versus Windows 11 benchmark if there's anything interesting to be seen there once it's, fully out in the wild and updated and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm expecting Windows 10 and Windows 11 performance to be identical for the most part. Yep. So We'll probably move over to Windows 11 once we update everything. So think next generation of GPUs. We'll probably update all our results.
I think Windows, it's important to remember that Windows 11 coming from Windows 10 isn't like a Windows 8 coming from Windows 7 sort of upgrade. Like the base framework of Windows 10 is very similar to Windows 11, so we shouldn't see as much of a difference with things like driver support or, while there are some features that are potentially going to be locked to Windows 11, we're talking about like very future-looking technologies because Microsoft wants people to update. So they're not going to just switch everything off the day it's released. So yeah, there's going to be some time where the crossover won't matter too much. And as you say, we're not expecting major performance differences. All right, we'll take a pause there on the questions. A lot of great stuff that we've been talking about so far, but there will be more stuff to talk about in the upcoming part, so check back for those on the channel shortly. We also really appreciate people who do submit questions on the YouTube community tab and who are also signed up to our Patreon and Floatplane accounts. You'll find links to those in the description below. But yeah, we've got our Discord community in there, which is a lot of fun. We get some great questions in there from you guys as well for these sorts of series. So yeah, really appreciate all the support. And yeah, don't forget the hardware unavailable merch is still available, which is good. Hardware unavailable, but this is available. Bit confusing. Get these links in the description below. And yeah, what else is there to say, Steve? I think that's pretty much it.
I think you've done a good job of wrapping that one up, Tim. So I think we should get into the rest of the questions.
Yeah.
But we'll finish this video first, then we'll do that. There'll be another video. You guys know how this works every month.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain it.
It's the same every month. So yeah, we'll sign off for now and get into that stuff. So maybe I'll start first. I'm your host, Tim.
Is that who you've been all this time? I'm your host, Steve.
We'll see you again
next time.